Big red one.
Got that one. Where's the Eddie key?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Security Happy Hour Live October Special. I'm Cyber Warrior, of course, coming at you, Cyber Warrior Studios. And we have a lot of guests with us today, so I'm not going to introduce them all. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And we actually have one more that's going to be joining us here in a little bit. But to get it started, why don't we have to my left, Dayspring. Well, I don't know. Dude, these cameras are messed up. I apologize. I'm pointing to my left, but Dayspring's on my right. So let's start with with Dayspring and have him introduce himself, since he's one of the newer guys to cybersecurity and IT and things like that. Why don't you give us some feedback on what you've been doing and where you're trying to get to?
Yeah, sweet. Thanks for having me on here. And so I am information security intern, and I just actually recently started my career in cybersecurity about 3 weeks ago. So I'm still in college, and I'm actually in my sophomore year in college. And cybersecurity is something I have a passion for, and it just basically started from I wanted to get experience in the field, and I wanted to like start getting experience while I was in college, and just trying to see how the industry is. So I started doing certifications. I tried the A plus earlier in January, but I failed. And then when the quarantine came, I tried it again and I passed. Did the Network Plus, passed, and started applying for different internships, different positions. And I tell you, I applied for like over like 200 positions and like several rejections and several like failed interviews. But I finally got the position I'm in right now, and I knew I actually wanted this position, and I just made sure to capitalize on the interview to like let these interviewers know that I'm the best fit for this job. So that's just kind of like a summary of my journey to this field.
Awesome. So yeah, you got a lot going on in the beginning. So hopefully, with Saki, we're able to help guide you and give you some more advice and things like that on how things go. So getting into it, why don't we move on down? Is it Ankit?
Yeah, it's Ankit.
Ankit. All
That's
right,
correct.
yeah, man. Why don't you let us
Yeah.
know? Because I found you through Crevolut and what you guys are doing. Why don't you kind of let us know what how you got into it and what you got going on, man?
Yeah, so my background isn't necessarily in security. I come from a data science background. I've historically had a lot of trouble getting into the security industry because I just didn't want to do random boxes or CTFs unless I understood the purpose behind them. So I'm trying to solve the problem here in terms of education. So my company, Crevolut, is developing a web browser experience to help students learn introductory programming. So it's the world's first strategy game that shows the connection and use case application of various technologies such as AI and cybersecurity. So that's what we're up to.
Awesome. All right, yeah. So we'll get more into that here in a little bit because I've investigated your platform a little bit. I've been on your Discord channel for a little while since my buddy Robbie invited me. So we'll get more into that. Let's go down below. Keatron, you just joined us. Why don't you give us a rundown? As one of my mentors, I kind of got a little bit of background on you, but why don't you give other people and the ones watching kind of where you came from and what you're doing now?
Sure. Yeah, I didn't really come from, I came from rural Mississippi. Like if you can think of any movie where you saw like the backwoods of Mississippi where it's just a bunch of country boys, that's where I came from. As a matter of fact, if you want to see that, go watch the movie Oh Brother Where Art Thou. And
Awesome movie.
You'll see like all the people I grew up with. Like that's kind of where I grew up. But yeah, I definitely didn't come from a traditional computer science background. It was more of just a general, IT everything background, at least starting. But I did work in the intelligence community for about 12 years doing stuff, various things. Not really related to programming. It was just more information operations, just getting information from places. And most of that was through exploitation of media, exploitation of systems. We would exploit everything from TVs to smartphones to, laptops, tablets. It didn't matter if it had data. Part of our mission was to find a way to, to get that data out without being detected, so to speak. So that was kind of how I got into, I guess you could say, pen testing or threat hunting or hacking. But then from that, I got some book deals. Like I wrote the book Chained Exploits. I wrote most of it. The book deal led to a lot of like news gigs. Like I was on CNN a lot, still on there a lot, and some other places. And all those things just lead to work and exposure and getting pulled into projects that you would never otherwise get pulled into. Get pulled into challenges you wouldn't otherwise get pulled into. And that's kind of how I got to where I am. And the whole evangelist thing and being out in the forefront was all, through InfoSec mostly. Yeah. InfoSec Institute.
Yeah.
Which is
and that's where
I think you took a class from me there, right?
Yeah, I took your certified ethical hacker. I actually mention you a lot because, when people ask about certifications and training and boot camps and things like that, in the Army and in the military, I'm not going to lie, I have an issue with the way they do their certifications because they'll contract out these boot camps that teach the test and you never really learn the material. You brain dump a test and then you go about your business. So it's all about checking the box. So when I got to go through InfoSec Institute with you, and it was about how to do the job, and I remember the exploit you showed us was one of the ones you wrote, and I can't remember what the exact command was, but you were able to hide not just that file, but any file you wanted to. So when it came down to the kill chain and it was cleaning up your tracks, it was the best thing in the world to see you actually hide the system files from the system itself, and you blue screen the VM. And you're like,
right? Yeah.
What do system admins do when their system's blue screen? They reformat their computers or restore from backup. They just cleaned up your tracks for you. I was like, oh my God, that's genius.
Yeah. Tricks of the trade. It's all out there.
It was awesome though, because that was the first time I had seen something like that. And the way you trained us and how to do the job was just something that I know for a fact in boot camps you don't see often. So that's why I enjoyed InfoSec Institute, and that's actually why I enjoy SANS as well, is because that's how they train you, is how to do the job. Because if you learn the concepts and how to do the job, then you'll pass any certification. The certification doesn't matter. The questions don't matter. It's how you're actually trained. So I really appreciated that. And honestly, I look forward to the other content that you've been providing both on LinkedIn and, on your YouTube channel and things like that. So it's exciting to see how far you've come even in the short time that I've known you, and the information you've been providing. So.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I appreciate all of that.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for all those kind words. But we're all just trying to do what we can, like that's
how it goes.
Some of us, like me, some of us get lucky, right? Like the only difference in me and you guys is I've luckily ran into opportunities that maybe you haven't yet,
Yep.
And when you run into that opportunity, you have to have prepared yourself to take advantage of it. That's what it boils down to, because
exactly.
So many people come into this and the opportunities present themselves and they haven't even prepared enough to even recognize that the opportunity is there yet,
For sure.
So by the time they recognize it, it's already passed by. So that's kind of my thing, is over prepare. Yep. So that when the opportunity presents itself, you can actually own it, not just take advantage of it, but completely own it.
Definitely. Hey, not to cut you off, but Davin Jackson from Alpha Cybersecurity says hi. So whomever here knows him, I had him on recently. He says hi to the people here. And then I got one of my old chiefs on live also. Well, he wasn't my chief, but I met him while I was in the Army. Chief Rucker, who does his own thing and owns his own company. He says hi as well. So
Davin was a student of mine too, actually.
Yeah, me and him talked about that. It was funny enough when Davin and Shannon were on the show, me and Davin talked about all the people who had taught us through the ways and who we knew. And it was crazy because we both wanted Shannon on the show. And then he talks about how he had Keatron as one of his instructors. I was like, yo, me too. And then how he knows Tyrone Wilson. And I was like, yo, I know him too. And it was crazy because like me and him just meshed in like so many different ways. It was awesome. But yeah, moving on. Hey, John, I know you, dude, I love the jersey, by the way. Palamalu is one of my favorite Steelers ever. Why don't you give us a bit of background? Because, you know, you reached out and we were talking, and actually you introduced me to, oh crap, I mixed it up again, Andy up there. And, you know, why don't you give us a little bit of background and let people know?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. I love what you're doing. So I got started by secretly joining the Army and getting married when I was 19. One of those things has panned out perfectly. It was the Army part. So I did 10 years in signals intelligence, so technical intelligence focused around communications. And I got out in 2010, and for a whole bunch of reasons we don't need to get into, I transitioned immediately into cybersecurity, and I had a huge break at Booz Allen Hamilton. They had a 5-week cyber boot camp when I first joined them. And I'd always been like the IT guy, like fixing my dad's compact 286 laptop on the Snap-on tool truck and running 200 feet of telephone wire so he could send his order for 2 hours and tie up the phone line. Like I was dad's IT guy when I was 10. So it kind of came back pretty quick to like being around computers. But it took me a long time to find where I fit in. Like I did all sorts of different things. I was an instructor for boot camps for a long time. And as a former boot camp instructor, you gotta be really careful with your boot camps. Like it's real hit or miss out there with the boot camp instructors. So I've done that. I did some counterintelligence, cyber analysis, and I finally found my niche in cyber threat intel analysis. But I say there's two types, even within cyber threat intel, I say there's two types of people. There's super tech people, and there's people more like myself. So I really enjoy using all that skill about geopolitical and report writing and briefing. And there are some people who are more DFIR and doing some of the reverse malware. I send my malware off to the lab, and then I write a report when that comes back.
There you go.
But you got to find your fit and know how you can contribute. There's a lot of, there's imposter syndrome, but like there's a place for anybody in cyber. Like we need soft skills, we need leadership, we need critical thinking, and that's all built on a foundation of understanding things. So anyway, I'm happy to be here. I'm an Army vet. We can talk about transition stuff. We can help the new guys find their path. I haven't been on CNN yet. Not sure I want to be on CNN, but it's exciting. So thanks for having me.
Look, when I start,
Yeah, trust me, any popular media outlet is good if you're, I mean, you work for a company, but if you're, you know, I own my company, so that exposure was key for me.
look, I'll tell you right now.
That 5-week boot camp at Booz Allen. I actually was one of the primary ethical hacking instructors when they were doing that. Because were you out at National Business Parkway?
Absolutely, it's 2 miles that way.
Yeah, I was doing the ethical hacking, the very end part of it. Actually, back when Snowden came through, and even before that.
In
2010 sounds about right.
2010.
Yeah,
I don't know if we
do you know Toby?
Yeah. Yes, I do.
I took.
Yeah, there might be some real close.
Yeah.
I took my CEH with Keatron in 2014, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, and it was when I was at the Pentagon. I was actually AMVID, so I was Army Television, but I was the IT guy for them because my chief engineer knew I knew IT, so I did all that. So then before my crossover to Cyber Network Defender, I said, hey, I'll get my CCNA security so I can hold this crap, I can't even think of what it is right now, but it was basically some certification to do work for active Army. I was like, but I'm going Delta, plus it'll cover the security side of things. Let me get my CEH. So as long as I did the CCNA security, which I did through InfoSec because I'd already had my CCNA and Fort Bragg refused to renew it for me, so I went through the entire boot camp again. I did CEH with Keatron, and it just, from there, like, and it was funny because I had been doing it for so long that it was still amazed me sitting with Keatron, and it really, being with him really put my mind in check of there are people out there smarter than you. Take advantage of it, because going through his class, he had like 3 different instances of like backtrack and Kali, and I was like, I don't even know if Kali was out yet, but definitely like 2 or 3 different instances of backtrack, plus like a Windows and a Ubuntu OS. I was like, dude, why do you have so many? He said, because not everything works, and sometimes you need older operating systems. And I was like, holy crap. So I still abide by that. I still have old images. Actually, I think I still have images that Keatron gave me where Perl is actually his shell. It is not even Bash. It is a Perl shell. And I was like, holy crap. So I keep those things. So yeah, man, like one thing I will tell you, and I've told other people, I'm hoping next year. So if I can get to 1,000 subscribers before the end of this year and start making money off of YouTube, next year I'm aiming to start up Cyber Warrior Studios streaming service so that everybody here and anybody else that wants to put content online doesn't have to worry about ads, doesn't have to worry about anything like that. It'll be a monthly subscription like anything else, but it'll be shows, news, training, you name it. You want to put it on there, you're free to put it on there. So if you want to do a news broadcast every day, feel free to do a news broadcast every day. I don't care. But we don't have enough information out there where YouTube can censor us. They've been pulling hacking training videos that offline unless you make them enough money.
Crazy.
And then you got Twitch, and then you got a lot of gamers on there and stuff like that. So to find our niche for the IT and cybersecurity community, I am developing a streaming service. That is the goal to Cyber Warrior Studios, to get to that point. So just so you guys are aware, that's what I'm aiming for. So when the time comes, don't worry about CNN, don't worry about any of them other ones. Our niche will be IT and cybersecurity, where we can reach our masses. We can reach the people that matter, the CISOs, the CIOs, and things like that. So that's my goal. Just to, do a little bit of shameless self-promotion on that one. Which means subscribe, because I need the subscribers and the viewership in order to get it. But following up
like
on
button.
that, Tom, why don't you let us know? We've interacted a little bit on Twitter and things like that. Why don't you kind of help us out?
Sure. My career's all over the place. I started off in help desk. I hated it. I quit. I went into construction. And then I went back and worked my way up through government contracting as a sysadmin. And then I didn't care for government work. I went startup to a bunch of different startups. I worked at major security vendors, very popular ones. They're still around today, doing automation and QA type work. And right now I am a red team developer, essentially. Though because of COVID, I got moved part-time. So that's frustrating. But I kind of do a little bit of everything. Yeah, it's terrible. Also, I'm a Ravens fan, so I apologize in advance.
Leave meeting.
Yeah. Boot. So, I mess with fuzzers. I built a fuzzing automation tool. Essentially, it's a framework that fuzzes any device that hits a network based on whatever fuzzer you want.
So is it an application level fuzzer? Like, are you fuzzing programs for issues?
It can do either.
It can do.
It's for application, mostly applications. But if you have a custom fuzzer, I just have to write some Python code and make that work.
Python
in theory.
scripters, yes.
Yeah. So yeah,
Dayspring
I
is
do.
Someone new. You need to do Python.
Yeah. So I only code in Python. Though I sometimes get randomly pulled into projects that are Java and Ruby based, which I don't really know.
I'm sorry.
Me too. I mean, that's pretty much it. I do a lot of automation, and I'm trying to get to a point where I'm no longer doing automation because that's all anyone wants me for, and I want to do literally anything else at this point.
Definitely. All right, man. Yeah, it's good to have you on, and so
Thanks for having
far, and we'll get into Andy's intro here in a quick second, but I like the variety. I like what we got going on. And I think hopefully this live episode provides a lot of knowledge and background for a lot of people out there, that it doesn't matter where you come from or what you do. If you have an interest in IT, cybersecurity, it is such a broad field, and the knowledge is so vast The network is out there. The people are out there. You can get into the career field. I don't care what you look like. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you got a degree in basket weaving. You can do it. If you love it, if you want to do it, you can do it. It's completely possible. So, Andy, why don't you finish this off with what you got going on, man?
Yeah, Andy Piazza, Killer Grizz on Twitter, and yeah, so I joined the Army in 2003. I grew up in Southern California and left for the Army, and because kind of was bored actually. Really, that was the main reason. Obviously, after 9/11, I was kind of interested in it anyway. Got bored one day in junior college. I was working for my dad at the time, learning run his construction company, and I called my stepmom. She was running the office side of things. I said, I want to be a little bit late. I'm going to the Army recruiters. And she just started giggling. And she's like, yeah, it's about time. We knew you were going to do it. Ended up, disappointing my family and telling them I signed up for EOD to be a bomb disposal guy. They were all freaking out, of course. And there was like 8 or 9 of us showed up from boot camp to EOD school. And they said, one of you guys might graduate. The rest are going to fail out. We're like, nah, man, we're all sticking together. We all did stick together, and we went needs of the Army, became military police because it was a really hard school. I remember the fail out rate was in the 80% when I went through in 2003. It was brutal. I love it. I mean, it's the only thing I've truly failed at, and I really wish I had earned my crab, but I definitely respect those guys because I immediately became an MP, got stationed at Fort Leonard Wood, and went to Iraq about 6 months later in June 2004. Did a year there training the Iraqi police in the wild west days. Was there for the first elections of Iraq, living on a rooftop. It was pretty amazing, pretty terrifying time, 21 years old, but came home, went home on 30-day block leave, came back. My unit, we had only gone to the platoon. My company was getting ready to go back to Iraq in a couple of months. And I went in, talked to the first sergeant. I wanted to go back with them, and instead of going to do law enforcement, went right back to Iraq 6 months later. And so I did 2 wonderful years driving around Baghdad, getting blown up. Wouldn't trade it for the world. It was absolutely amazing. Then I ended up getting PCS'd out here to Northern Virginia area, DC. I was assigned to Fort Belvoir around a bunch of intel folks. Got really interested in intel, realized that law enforcement wasn't for me. So I ended up still active duty. I was working on my bachelor's, and I was getting out in 2011 as I was finishing my bachelor's in intelligence studies. Got a job as, physical security specialist, getting, badges and clearances squared away for a Pentagon CIO organization that's now all rolled up under DISA. But was around all these IT guys, and my contract was all InfoSec folks. And I was like, my PM was like, you got to get Security Plus and then CISSP. And I was like, I don't even know what those things are. I do security clearances and badges. So I still had all my GI Bill. I'd only used it for like 1 or 2 classes. So I did my master's first in Intel. And I was there, and got hired by my company to be a security manager for another Pentagon shop. And it was the same thing. I was like, I don't understand what these guys are, I was understanding risk, obviously, from an Intel perspective, but I still had a bunch of GI Bill left. So I ended up doing an undergraduate certificate in IT security, and CEO of my company. I work for an amazing company called FIA. But my CEO, Trong, was like, man, you're looking a little bored with the security stuff, and handed me a malware analyst cookbook. And he's like, go through this. If you're interested in it, we'll talk about, possibly a career change. I was so excited. I was like, yeah, cyber's the thing. Went home, opened it up, couldn't get through the intro chapter, didn't know half the words. It was like, oh God. I actually ended up picking up the book about 3 years later and was like just burning through it. Like my daughter was down for a nap at the time. I was like burning through like 2 or 3 chapters before she woke up. I was like, this is amazing. But that, I tell that story like just how fast in 2 to 3 years I went from literally couldn't get through the intro paragraph because I didn't have the requisite pre-knowledge to read an intro to burning through chapters 2 to 3 years later. So, to the young folks in the career, no matter your age, young folks in the career-wise, it's overwhelming, right? There's a conversation on Twitter right now. They got the big career map up, and I included my career hacking talk at B-Size Nova. Use that as a guide of what you need to study. Don't get overwhelmed by the amount of data that's out there. There's still so much stuff I learn every day. That's one of the things I love about the career field is I don't ever get bored. But I got a chance to transfer into cyber threat intelligence, and I was over supporting DHS, US CERT back then became NKIC, now CISA. I was there for about 4 years on their information sharing program with the private sector. We had about 200 companies sharing threat intelligence. It was amazing. Got exposed to a bunch of companies in critical infrastructure, the challenges they have. got really interested in threat hunting and moved to the client I'm at now that I'm supporting. I'm a threat hunter, threat intelligence analyst there. It's awesome. It's a real large organization with a lot of different problem sets to go play with, right? ICS, point of sales, all the fun stuff. So I get to learn all kinds of different hunting. And like I said, I'm learning every day. Still had a little bit of GI Bill left, and I wanted to get a couple of certifications. So I signed up for the SANS Master's program. I should hopefully be finishing that next year in 21. Yes, I'm terrified of taking the GSE, but hopefully we'll crush that thing.
And that's awesome. So I've talked to the SANS Master program, and I've looked into it. I don't have enough GI Bill left. Unfortunately, I've only got like 3 months, so I'm still trying to buy a house next year, so I can't afford it. But
yeah,
it's
so I tell people, people talk about the cost of SANS. One, going through the EDU, you get a tuition rate. You're not paying the full like 10K.
Exactly. And you can pay monthly now too. They have it's a non-loan. You just basically pay monthly to where before you could. They explained to me it's either before you can take the certification or before you can finalize something, you just have to have it all paid off. But
and they just announced 2 days ago they've teamed up with a university in Maryland. I can't remember which one.
Probably UMUC.
But you go through their university program, you do 6 courses, and you do an internship. So you're getting education, certification, and experience.
Where are you
like
at,
that's
Dayspring?
the trifecta. Yeah, where are you at? You listening?
Yeah.
But that's really the trifecta. We talked about, getting into InfoSec is hard. Nobody wants to take the opportunity to put a newbie on the network, right? I've seen malware analysts detonate malware on their desktop because they didn't have training to know about a sandbox or know about a VM, right? You think about taking a kid straight out of college, make him a firewall engineer. Without any training, he could open up the entire enterprise to the internet. If he doesn't have good supervision or doesn't know what he's doing.
Well, here's the thing to that. And Keatron, as someone that owns your own business, maybe you can tie into this a little bit. My big thing on that is when they talk about new people, any college student I've ever talked to, I've always said, you can't just go buy a degree. You can't just go buy a certification. If you're bringing someone new in that doesn't have experience per se, they need to make a name for themselves somehow. So if it's a blog, if it's a YouTube channel, if it's whatever, something that shows they're actively learning and actively pursuing and working on the technology that they're trying to work on for a company, then that gives them a little bit of backing. Whereas if you have nothing, you just went through school and applied to a job, then where's your, especially in security where everybody's like, I need 2 to 3 years experience, you have nothing to back you up because you have no proof out there.
And
that's why you got to get realistically, you need a scripting language, and you need to have a Git profile and post up some coding examples. That really helped me, and more cybersecurity jobs are moving towards, not all of them, granted, but a lot of them are moving towards, you need a little bit of programming experience.
One of the things I'll say too is I mentor and talk to a lot of junior people in this field, and they say, I want to be in cybersecurity. That's not specific enough.
No.
And they have one general resume, and they're sending that resume to every job they're applying for, and they don't even probably understand the difference between the types of jobs they're applying for. So you have to narrow your field of focus and field of study too. Like, what do you want to do in this field? There's so many things you can do. So that's the biggest thing I keep coming back to, is tailoring the resume, getting professional resume advice, and narrowing down what you're talking about so that you can say, this is my cyber blue team entry-level resume, or my SOC tier 1 resume, or my entry-level vulnerability job thing I'm trying to do because I want to be a red teamer. Because people are just like, I want to work in cyber, and the colleges aren't providing this at all. They're just, people are like, yeah, this is the resume the college said was good to go. And I was like, this is freaking terrible. Like, this isn't good advice. So I agree with what you're saying, but that's one of the biggest things. For you guys that are on screen too, there's a B-Sides Orlando coming up. There's going to be a Career Village. I'll be there along with some other folks. There's a lot of free places to network, get your resume reviewed, and talk to people in the field, because that's critical.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one thing I would say, John had mentioned about the whole CTI thing, and I know that's a little niche for some of you, but it's near and dear to my heart. when I started off in CTI, cyber threat intelligence, I was overwhelmed by the technical stuff. And it wasn't until about a year ago I started quantifying, and I actually call a lot of what people think about CTI, much like cyber, the difference between cyber and InfoSec, is the technical, right? I think a lot of people think about CTI, they're actually thinking about all source, in parentheses, cyber. They're applying a skill set they could have applied to counterterrorism, counter narcotics, or anything else. That's all source. And like I'm mentoring a gentleman through from VetSec. I met through VetSec. If you're a veteran and not VetSec, I would tell you join their Slack. But he had reached out to me as he was transitioning out of the Air Force. He's doing great things. He's learning, malware analysis, getting ready to go through GREM. And he was like, well, like I'm hunting, and I'm also doing malware analysis, and I also do a little intelligence. Like, what would you call that role? And I was like, that's CTI, bro. It's intelligence analysis, but with technical chops. If you're just intel, you're all source, and that's not a shame. The really big reason I want to say that there's a difference between all source cyber and CTI isn't about gatekeeping, but it's about young Andy and his career. I came from a part of the Army where you weren't allowed to not have the answer. Like this whole intel thing, we're like, I'm gonna go look it up, and that's okay. As an MP, like that would have gotten me killed. Like my NCOs just would have punched me in the head. Like you always had to at least pretend you knew the answer. And so for a long time, I lived with this guilt in my CTI role that I didn't know. I'd read like a threat report, FireEye, and get halfway down and then start getting the malware analysis and just kind of gloss over. I want young analysts to know that that's okay that you don't know that stuff.
Yeah,
or if you
for sure.
Host stuff and you don't know network stuff, that's okay. It's okay to not know.
Yeah, and that's a big thing. And like I was saying, so Keatron, you own a consulting company, and I know every once in a while you hire people. So what's your take on it? You're on mute, dude.
Yeah, I was gonna get around to responding, but everybody else jumped in, so I wanted to let everybody else get their what they were gonna say, because it was some good stuff. But yeah, I wasn't ignoring you. I was definitely just waiting. I know.
I saw your face change. I was like, all right.
Yeah. Well, so a couple of things. One is I never got completely out of the education side. So what I've done over the last 15, 20 years is collected all the way back from when John came through Booz Allen back there. I've probably certified over like 15,000 people, and I've kept careful eyes on that data, of what a lot of those people have went on to do, how they came into cyber, what their path was. And I think one of the mistakes that people like us make sometimes when we're trying to advise people is you get too tunnel vision on how you got into cyber. And, it could be possible that the advice you're giving someone based on how you got there is the complete wrong advice for that person. So realistically, a couple things that come to mind, as you know, my entire YouTube channel and my entire LinkedIn presence is how to get into cyber. And here's how you find out how you specifically get into cyber, because there are so many different job roles. And, some of them, as was being said already, some of them are technical, some of them aren't. I mean, the most money I've ever made per hour doing cyber, everybody thinks about military and intelligence stuff. Even though I came out of that background, the most money I've ever made is I was making like $2,000 an hour doing a response thing for a law firm. This big law firm called me and a couple other people in. And just when I started my business, it was like 80% government and 20% private industry. Now it's about 70% private industry, 30% government. And you know why that is? Because private industry pays me a ton more money to do a lot more fun stuff with a lot less restrictions, because they have to be competitive. That's what it's all about. So for one, I think when people say they want to get into cyber, you do have to ask them, what do you mean specifically? But as people that are been in the industry for a while, you also have a responsibility to give them resources to let them see all the different things so that they can make that decision. So what I usually do is I give them a bunch of resources and say, look, you can do IT security auditing, you can do risk work, you can be like a risk analyst. There's all these other things. You can do the technical stuff like we do. And I let them go and research that. And I tell them, once you research all these things and you find something that seems very interesting to you, and you think it maybe aligns to some experience you have, come back and we can talk about it, because I don't want you to limit yourself to just what's closest to what your experience is, but I also want you to be realistic and know that you're probably going to get a little bit further faster if you abut your cyber career to something you've already got some experience with. Like that's a good way to get in. And also telling people to get into cyber, like saying they got to have this and that. Well, understand that doing what we do, like what Andy does or what John does or what anybody in here does, that's not the only job in cyber. You know, what I tell people a lot of times, look at some of like the entry-level SOC analyst jobs. Though they don't want anything. They just want you to have a high school diploma, basically, to be an entry-level SOC analyst. That is a great entry-level role for you to get in, know nothing, sit there and punch tickets and learn about behavior and learn about packet captures. It's a very elementary area, but that's also how you get that security plus level hands-on knowledge base where you understand these things.
I was told if I get into cyber, I'll make 100K. I can't do that in the SOC. Where's my 100K I was promised?
Yeah, I mean,
there was just a discussion on LinkedIn with Chris Rides, who's a recruiter who's been fantastic, who some entry-level SOC jobs will pay as much as 80K. Yeah. Maybe that's UK money. I wasn't 100% sure, but
here's the thing, and here's what I tell people, and Ankit, I'm gonna let you tag in here in a little bit because you have a lot of programming stuff that I want you to go over with these guys, especially when it comes to scripting and things like that, because it's very important to the field. But one of the things I want to say, and I tell it to everybody, you can't chase money. You can't get into cybersecurity because of money. Yes, as you progress, you can get paid well. But here's the problem. To progress, you need to have the drive to constantly research, evolve your knowledge, evolve your skill set. And if you're driven solely by money, then you're going to end up with companies, bosses, whatever the case may be, that you're constantly miserable because you may be on call for a week. You may be, working 18-hour days for an incident response or whatever the case may be, or even a pen test, because sometimes clients want you to work at, midnight till 6 a.m. And, I tell people you don't get into it for money. You get into it because you enjoy the field because of how much you have to learn and grow with the field because of how often it changes. And I'm not afraid to be wrong.
If anybody saw the B-Sides Boston, there was a fantastic presentation about So You Think You Want to Be a CISO? And it was one of the best presentations I saw because he said most of the people who talk to him about being a CISO want to be a CISO because of the money. And that's very telling. And I think we don't talk about this enough because what I think is a good salary and life balance is different for everybody else. But as like people who mentor junior folks, we need to be much more upfront and talk about salary and lifestyle, because I tell people like incident response might sound fantastic and you might like that. But if you're like commercial incident response, like, do you understand what that might mean? Like with travel and like family obligations and things. And I think from like a career mentoring perspective, we need to be really honest with folks, like why a federal or state government job might be perfect for some people, right? It's different in the commercial sector. And I don't think that gets enough. Like there's a lot of mentorship about like technical things. And like some people want to start their own companies and like there's serial company startup people. And that might not work for everybody. But I think we should have those kinds of conversations as we're mentoring people too.
Yeah, I try not to get too idealistic with it, Derek and John, really because, for example, some people are just motivated by money, dude. Like you can talk to you blue in the face, but at the end of the day, that's what they care the most about. Yeah. And if I run into a person that wants to get into cyber because of money, I'm really not going to change my messaging, because the fact that you still need to learn these things, you need to master this, you need to be good at this. If you want to do this specific role, like if you've identified, I want to do this job, here's some things you need to master. That message is not going to change much for me if they're motivated by money, right? Because for some people, that's actually what motivates them. And some of the best dudes I've had to work for me are those dudes that are just so driven by money because they really want to get to that next level, and they'll do whatever it takes to get there. So I think we have to be careful with that, but at the same time, it's not always a bad thing if they're super driven by success and money.
Yeah, and you're right, but I think there's a difference between success and money. While some people see more money, more success, like they equivalent, it's equivalent to them. So I understand what you're saying. I don't know, maybe it's the way I am, and I understand your point, but I've always found that when you are constantly going after money, you're going to piss a lot of companies off in the process unless you work for a company.
But you're going to attract a lot of companies too, though.
So
Right.
let me say this. Everyone has a different definition of success per their livelihood.
Yeah.
Secondly, it's okay to chase money to a degree. I like in IT, you can change jobs every 2 years and you'll probably get a pay bump. Realistically, depending on who you work for, you could be at a company 2 years and they're hiring a new person for, $40K more than what you're currently making. And that's not okay either. It's a two-way street between you and the company, and there needs to be communication.
Yeah.
I think there also needs to be communication with people openly talking about their salaries, because you don't know if you're getting screwed. And that's the truth. Like I'll put this out there. I left a company that I was running because they hired someone for me to train that was making 50K more than me. And I was the manager. That's nuts to me.
Yeah, and I hear you on that. And again, it can be a long, drawn out conversation. We could talk the rest of the episode about this, but I still got some other things. And Ankit is somebody
I want to
who
circle
does
back on
training.
I want to circle back on one thing.
All right, go ahead, Andy.
For getting in, we were talking about dabbling and everything. One of my number one recommendations I make is get into like Cybrary or any of the free courses and take all of the intro courses and find out what actually aligns to you. I've tried to learn to code. It's a foreign language. I've given up multiple times. I tried, I thought, pen testing was going to be awesome. I found that not getting the flag over and over and over again was really effing frustrating, and I'll never
kind of demoralizing.
So do all of the intro course for $0. Spend a couple hours, intro to malware, intro to SOC, intro to penetration testing, and find what fits your personality. Right, you could be a really good auditor. I can't do that. I'm ADD. Auditing would blow my mind, and I would be bored. But you may really be a good one. So that's my number one advice: is take a look at all the free intro courses, and then find the path that interests you.
Well, that ties into the money thing a little bit too, because a lot of people, I think, are under the impression like pen testers and red teamers are sexy and they must get paid like the most. Dude, reverse malware engineers with a top secret SCI clearance are about, like, unless you want to run a company, like they are like I see the contracts, like that's insane amount of money. Like I make what I believe is an insane amount of money for me personally, but I want people to work in something they enjoy too, which kind of ties all this in together. So like, I don't ever want to dissuade someone from chasing their dreams of success, but I also don't want people to hate their job. Right. So like I very briefly was a pen tester and was like, oh my God, this is terrible. Get me to cyber threat intel. Right. But like, I think it's a combination of a lot of these things, because if you're in this field, there's a lot of flexibility because you can change jobs. And if you're really good at your job, you can find a niche where you kind of like most of what you do, and that can pay a decent amount of money as well. So like that's my whole perspective when I'm trying to help people.
So Andy said something, and Udemy has sales all the time, and there's a couple of $12 decent courses out there for entry level to like pen testing and or Python with pen testing and things like that, and obviously reverse malware engineering and things like that. So that's definitely good entry level stuff to look at if you're trying to figure out what your niche is. But also, before you apply for a job, look at the title and research. Now, some companies throw a title out there and it has nothing to do with what the actual title means anywhere else. But look at what they're asking for to see if like you want to do it before just blindly applying, because that's a big thing too.
Yeah. So Ankit, they were talking about training and Crevolut, and it's the reason I have you on here, especially with Dayspring here, going through all his training and everything else like that. And Dayspring, please, when you get the chance, chime in and let us know your thoughts on everything that's being talked about. But with Crevolut doing a lot with scripting and programming, and they're kind of changing the game in how you can learn programming, because I've seen a lot of gamified training. What's so different about your platform that can entice, veterans and, new people to cybersecurity and IT to really get into at least doing an intro course or an intro, to programming with you guys, so that they can at least understand the basics and see whether or not they would like it?
Yeah, so I think it's so a lot of thoughts were sort of spread around the cybersecurity domain. So speaking from a completely different domain, in data science, there is no official certification. It's a very math-heavy domain. You're expected to know a lot, and it's not as dynamic as cyber per se. We don't have new algorithms coming up every day, but it's definitely changing. And one of the biggest education problems that data science faces a level 3 problem, which is the use case part of it. People need to know where data science can be applied, let's say in retail. Data science can be applied in healthcare. Data science can be applied, let's say, in cybersecurity. Cybersecurity faces a level 2 problem, which is the visualization problem. And that's why a lot of juniors who are getting into cybersecurity, they don't understand which field they want to particularly target on, which is why they group together something in terms of hacking. Part of that has to do with the amount of PR that one specific side of cybersecurity gets. There is no one single driver or one single influencer who's driving this constant change and balancing both those things out. So that's my perspective. Also, there is this order and chaos balance that happens in every field. There is the build and then there is the break. If everyone's focusing on the break part of it, and not a lot of people are going into the build part of it, that is going to ultimately cause a shortage of talent, which is why you'll always see like the bad guys coming ahead of the good guys. It's not because there's a lack of training, but it's also because there is a specific direction of training that's involved. I always say that force is a vector quantity. It has both magnitude and direction. You can apply as much magnitude as you want, but if the direction isn't right, you might land nowhere. And in terms of cybersecurity, I think the number one thing that we identified early on is that tools are nice. They can be used by everyone, but I think you have to show applications of, if I have to be a cybersecurity analyst tomorrow or a malware analyst tomorrow, I have to put them inside a company, like a financial services company. I have to simulate that experience. I can't just tell them, this is a financial services company, this is the box, break it. It doesn't work that way. You have to give it an experience, and it has to be sort of a VR surreal feeling that games are able to do. You have to put them in that space. It doesn't matter if they have an experience or not. It doesn't matter if they have a certification or not. Put them in that space and give them the right guidance. That's how they will learn, because it's intriguing, it's captivating. And that's, I think, the forefront of where cybersecurity is heading. I was talking to one of the key executives of Cylance and Darktrace. These two companies are at the forefront of combining AI and cybersecurity. And the number one thing that we agreed on is the future of cybersecurity training is basically in scalable virtual machines. You will have to give them a playground, use permutations and combinations, and allow students to construct their own playground, and then try and give it as a community challenge. It can't be just one hard box, one problem, solving one thing at a time. It has to specify, this is the application in this specific domain done at this time. And I need to know that this is what is going to be the impact if I don't solve it. This is a healthcare company, and I have to sort of, prevent the bad guys from coming in. I have to know what my priorities are. I have to know, and I have to think like a manager, act like a manager. And oftentimes, even though CISOs and CIOs talk quite a lot, no disrespect, but I think it's also their job to maybe influence and persuade people to not think cyber as a binary problem. It's not a 0 or 1. There's a lot of middle ground in there. And just like in programming, you can measure outcomes based on, let's say, the number of features a developer has shipped. There is not a lot of sort of measuring tools which can basically say, oh, okay, today I stopped like 20 attacks, because no one pays attention to it. So there is the communication gap that happens too in a board meeting, because you'll sit down and you'll be like, well, there's the cyber guys, and they're like, by the way, can we talk about security for a second? And guys are like, well, it's secure, right? Like, not getting attacked. We don't have a big enough threat vector. that's exactly why I mentioned visualization problem.
And
You
and
need to.
I agree with you there, because at that point, and you see it a lot even as a consultant, in what I do in some of my other companies that I've worked for, security doesn't really get the ability to, even though we can quantify risk ourselves and present it to a board, sometimes the board doesn't give you the time of day. And so and it's not always, but a lot of companies these days, and I'm gonna throw a shout out there to Lisa Forte, who does rebooting. She just did a show on, she basically gave an example of a breach for a company on her show, and it's the way some of these companies handle things, where they're just kind of like, well, can I lie? Can I do this? Can I, who cares? We're just not gonna tell the customer. And unfortunately, you still see that to this day. Companies don't want to come forward because of reputation. So, in terms of training, we've talked a lot about the technical aspect. We've talked a lot about, CTI and the different aspects of training. But let's raise it up a level to that CISO, who has to be able to enable the business and talk numbers, and still work with the technical guys and talk technology. How do we bridge that gap where they're given the time of day at the board and still, have the technical aptitude to talk to their technical guys and be able to deliver a mission to them? Because when I look at a company, I look at that CIO or CISO, if there is one, as my commander, right? They're the guy that's going to deliver a mission statement to us and let us know what they want to accomplish for the company in terms of security. So how do we go about making that happen within companies right now?
Yeah, so I've worked at Quantopian for a few months, wherein we had to basically develop these algorithms for the stock market, and we were trying to beat the S&P 500 index, and there was this weekly competition that used to happen every single week. And the funny thing is, every time we used to go in this board meeting, people used to ask, well, all right, how is your algorithm performing? And we used to be like, well, it's performing okay. They're like, all right, cool, mission accomplished, right? And I was like, hold on, I'm going to show you real business impact here, right? And you suddenly pull up this graph and you'd be like, okay, look, if this isn't done within a week, we're going to lose out. And we almost lost out this energy trade deal, wherein we sold cheap energy between Germany and Netherlands. And that was orchestrated with the help of this hedge fund in New York, which is called Sequence Capital. And we almost missed out on that deal because our inputs weren't taken seriously enough. It wasn't until the CIO and the CTO board jumped in and they were like, well, this might be worth a look. So I think this communication channel that exists, it's also, as I mentioned about the PR thing, you have shows like Mr. Robot, which perpetuate a certain type of behavior. They don't debunk myths here. It's funny when people say that the show was good because it was accurate. Well, sir, it's supposed to be accurate. That's the principle. It's like me implementing blockchain and saying it was trustworthy, right? It's part of the technology. It cannot be sort of like mistaken with outcome. So I think the communication gap of, and this goes back to training. You have to teach them how to communicate. You have to make sure you tell them, you have to open up and you have to present in a certain way. You can't just be like, oh, by the way, are we just not going to respond to this threat? We can't say that. There is a certain way of saying things. There's a certain way of presenting things. And I think if the cyber community can sort of get together and sort of orchestrate this change, which is funny because programming community is divided anyways. If they can orchestrate a change, that would be very, very impactful.
For sure.
That sort of communication.
Sure. Yeah. So Dayspring, is someone new to the field. What do you see? What do you think coming along? How can you make an impact coming in, especially being, at your internship now and what you're trying to do?
So, what I've really seen is like there's like a gap between like college students and like the hiring people in charge of hiring. So especially when it comes to like gaining experience while you're in college. I feel like the thing with us college students, some of us still feel like we are not qualified enough for, you know, at least like internship positions, and some of us don't even know like the path we want to go to, which you already talked about earlier on. And it's I feel like my what I'm trying to do with like my YouTube channel right now is to kind of like show people that, you know, it's not, you don't necessarily have to like have all these like higher level qualifications. I don't necessarily have to wait till you're done with college before you start gaining like relevant experience. So like just like letting them know, you know, what can you do to like gain like base knowledge and also make yourself marketable to the hiring manager, and just let them know that, you know, you know your stuff, and like they can take you in and train you in things that, you know, you might be interested in. So I think that's like really the major thing. And that's just like uh I think there needs to be like a bridge gap between you know, the experience as a college student, and also the people that are in charge of hiring. And also some people think you have to like wait till you're like your fourth year in college or your third year in college before you start gaining experience or start like applying for internships. And I don't think that's the case, because like right after my freshman year I just applied, and it wasn't necessarily the most easiest thing, but like people need to know that you can start getting it, and just putting yourself out, learning, because I had to go through like several failed like interviews and several failed like applications and rejections before getting the position. But it's like persistence, consistency, and just mainly like bridging the gap between the newbies, like the college students, and those in charge of hiring.
Yeah, and I agree, man. Like, it's one of those things, you have to find your niche, you have to find what you really want to do, and you won't know that until you try. And especially in college, college is the best time to try because you're in school. So if you can apply for internships and get different internships throughout your years, not every company is going to be willing to do it, but as long as you make the concerted effort, I think that's an awesome way to go about it. But I see.
have final statements to make actually on the training part. I think regarding the college thing, my fourth year of university, everyone was focusing on just one particular subject, which was data structures and algorithms. It was the easiest way to get in the top 4 companies. You nail their coding challenge, you get through interviews, decent personality talk, go through the HR round. That was the easiest way to go about it. And some people just couldn't take it. It's just too much. It's a very hard problem to solve. They can't be sitting in front of computer screens competing at the highest level. And they realized that there is an alternative path, which was to make projects. And this goes back to what I think Keatron was saying, that you have to have alternative ways to sort of get into the domain. So teach them how to sort of build things as well,
Right.
instead of breaking things.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's
Yeah, definitely. Keatron, you got something to say, man?
probably
What
one of the
you got?
biggest problems. Yeah.
Yeah, I do actually. So a couple of things to that point. One, there's a couple of things that haven't been mentioned yet that I think is really important, especially for people like Dayspring. One, so I went on this undercover thing back towards the middle of the summer, and I went on like undercover interviews for like 3 big companies. And as you know, Derek, there's a lot of CISOs of Fortune 500 companies that, again, trained under me many, many years ago that are now CISOs. And sometimes they'll do things like say, hey, can you come in and check this for us? We got a security team. We got FireEye, whoever in here doing this, but, we just want like someone else to kind of take a look on the back end. So I went and did these interviews, and if I name the 3 companies, you guys would all know exactly who the companies are. And I applied for a pen tester job, an incident response manager job, and this position they call security partner, which basically meant that you would be responsible for relaying security information to all the different conglomerates that this company had purchased over the years. So let me just say this to you, Dayspring. On those job interviews, one thing that I came out of that learning, because it's been so long since I've asked somebody for a job, is I would say that probably 50% of the interviews that you go on that go bad, it's probably not even 1% your fault. It's a lot of times a fault of the person interviewing, because let me tell you, the people in cybersecurity that are interviewing and hiring managers, a lot of them are terrible, absolutely terrible at interviewing and asking the right questions. Because for one of these companies, I know the company's very heavy developer and programmer based. Like the company was founded by programmers, all the senior people are programmers. And this dude was asking me, I was going to be the incident response lead. That's what I was interviewing for. And we spent the whole hour talking about C structures and, how to nest things in Java and this, and that. And at the end of it, I just asked him, I was like, so how are we going to relate this to, because I thought it was interviewing for incident response lead. He was like, well, yeah, it is, but I mean, we're a big software company. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not going to be writing software, right? I'm going to be leading incident response. He's like, yeah. And I finally figured out that his interview was geared towards what he knew. And the reason he was the person in charge of security is because he knew more about security than all the other developers that were like founders of the company. So the first thing is, don't get discouraged if you go on a bad interview, because it could be you. Like, it totally could be something you screwed up on, but it could absolutely be who interviewed you too. So I want you to think of it like we tell wide receivers to have a short-term memory. So if something goes really bad, don't take it to the next play. When you go on the next interview, reload as if it's your first interview. Go in there with that same confidence. Don't let that bad interview or those bad interviews keep you from going. The other thing too I want to mention, and this has affected my business tremendously, actually positively. So about 5 years ago, I started to re-up my own certifications, and I focused a lot on AWS and Google Cloud and Azure. And once I really got into it and understood the technology, I started to tell people, like, look, you need to start learning cloud. Like, if you're going to be in cyber, in 5 years, you're going to need to be cyber and cloud. And ironically, now, if you look at the top 5 banks in the US, the top 5, 3 of those banks, I'm on the phone with them every week doing various types of consulting. And one of those banks just sent out a massive email about a month ago that told basically all of their network engineers, they told them, like, look, within the next 24 months, you're going to have to become a cloud infrastructure engineer. They told all of the people that are developers, you're going to have to become a cloud architect. They told all the people that do cybersecurity, you're going to have to become a cloud security engineer. You're going to have to become, all of your job titles going to have the word cloud in front of it, and you're going to master those skills, or you're going to have to go find a job somewhere else and work at another bank. And then I noticed the other banks are following trend there. The reason that big data breach happened with Capital One, and the reason it was such big news, is because it was related to AWS and the WAF that they had in there and all that. But the key there is Capital One is 90% cloud migrated, like 90%, to where their data is migrated to cloud. And other companies are following suit. A lot of guys that come from the DoD background and that type, like, well, we're DoD or we DHS, we're intelligence, and we don't have to worry about it. Talk to me in 3 years when that JEDI contract is really actually got all the way going, and you tell me you're not touching some cloud. So another thing, and this is specifically you, Dayspring, and you can tell your audience, you need to start marrying cloud technologies. It doesn't matter which area of security you're going into, even if you're going to be an IT auditor. Well, guess what? In 5 years, when you're auditing these big companies, you're going to be auditing in a cloud environment. Like, that's just what it's going to be. So I would say, out of all the things that we've said here, that's one of the technologies that you really need to start kind of getting your head wrapped around. And to Ankit's point of building your own environment, don't build VMs, don't build desktops, go build that environment in AWS or in Google Cloud or in Azure. Learn how to do it there. Because if you do that, what you're doing is, in parallel, you're learning the security technologies that you want to focus on, but you're also kind of separately learning cloud technologies. You're learning it in the right environment that's going to set you up for not now, but for the next 10 years or so. And, then you'll get into Docker and containers and using Lambda functions and serverless technology and all that, which is kind of the stuff that I'm digging deep into now.
Can you teach me Lambda, Keatron?
I do actually. And what's happened is now I've got a lot of stuff in AWS, and to the things that I was running, I was spending something like 10 grand a month on, my AWS fees. So now just learning Lambda, really learning serverless architecture. I mean, like really learning it, not just on the surface. I'm down to something like $600 a month now.
Can you give me an instance can you pay an instance for me so I can host some shit?
If you let me put a rootkit on it and know at all times what's going on.
All right, cool. I'll let you do whatever you want. It's yours.
They say he just wants to stream video from it. That's got to be cheap, right?
But yeah, so that's kind of the point I wanted to get out, is because nobody had mentioned it. I was trying to give somebody else a chance to bring it up. But I figured out what somebody did.
Yeah, you know what, Keatron? I got to be honest. That is the one field I know we're migrating to. I know everybody's migrating to the cloud, but I'm like one of them last people that wants to hang on to. I want my stuff on my computer where I have control of the network and everything. So that is why I've been so resistant to it. But I do understand that it's money, man. Like, you can save a lot of money, a lot of electricity bill, a lot of everything migrating to the cloud.
Well,
like, initially I thought it was just, it's hardware. You're saving on hardware, but when I really thought about it, you save so much.
It's not just money. It's the fact that you can have an Ankit that can compete with freaking Target or Walmart now, right? Because if you look at a company like Target, they were telling me that the amount of data center and compute resources that they use from the day after Thanksgiving to January 1st is 10 times more than they use all the rest of the year, because, the Christmas rush. Well, that used to actually be an advantage for them, because who can afford that much infrastructure for 365 days a year? Nobody but Target and Walmart, basically.
Yeah.
Well, now anybody can, because you can now, because of cloud services, you can spin up that amount of resource for that 30 days and pay for that 30 days. And then on January 1st, shrink it back down to the minuscule part of that you need. And now you can compete with Walmart and Target during that Christmas rush.
Yeah.
So it's not just about saving money. It's about you being able to have resources that otherwise we couldn't afford, because traditional data centers, if you're going to rent rack space, you're going to rent it for a year, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to give you like a 30-day contract to rent space in like a traditional data center.
I'll also say though,
was that?
Sorry, I was going to add about the attitude of, I think majority of us in security have that attitude. Like, I'd rather own it and touch it. One, I mean, I think that's a fallacy, because like my server racks aren't even in my building, they're in a different location anyway.
Right.
But the other thing is, the business has been talking about this for years. This is the one project that we don't get to complain about. Like, I didn't see it coming. We've been talking about cloud for 10 years.
Right.
And every security person I know, like, it still hasn't gotten a cloud cert. I would tell you, if you're coming in the field, get your Security Plus and then a cloud cert before you do anything else.
Google, any of them.
You would be more valuable than I am with experience.
Right now.
And I've gotten all of those. I've gotten the AWS ones, the Google ones, and the Azure ones, because I'm spinning up to start teaching some of that stuff at some point. But, the thing about that whole I want to own it, I don't want to own it, right? Like, if I've got a rack in my basement, do you think I'm naive enough to think that rack is physically more secure than if those same servers in Amazon's data center? I don't have 100 armed guards.
But I
standing
think
around
there's a difference. There's a difference between physically secure and control over the network, and I think it's my misconception of how to configure networking, because I'm not cloud certified. I like I said, I don't know very much about the cloud, which is gonna burn me. People are like, "Why don't you know about the cloud already?" Because it's somebody else's computer. But I break into them. I don't deal with them. But no, controlling the networking infrastructure within that cloud, kind of like how you can control your own. You can control your firewalls, your internet, your ISP. Like, you can control all that inflow.
You still control all that. You still control all that if you design it right. And if you pay the right amount of money, right? There's different, you just got to take a class from me in the cloud.
I told you, Keatron, when you get to the class, you let me know. We'll do a class together.
Yeah.
You can teach me again, because you can
pay to have a physical server, right? Like, you can pay enough money to where all of your stuff in Amazon sits on a server that's got only your stuff on it. But you're going to pay a lot of money for that.
Yeah,
I will say
your virtual private cloud, but you're going to pay for that.
I will say, as a threat hunter,
you cannot pay for that, pay a fraction of that, and get something close to that, right? And to be honest with you, when you look at it, and this is something I learned about working a lot with the risk managers and risk officers of organizations, it's all about calculated risk, man. Like, how much are you going to spend? How much of your brain power and your worry are you going to devote to things that have like this much risk? You know,
all of security comes down to calculated risk.
And it's
all it is.
And it's
that's really what it
quantifying
is.
it, right? So we look at, you know, when we bring risk to a company and what their risk level is and what their risk appetite is, we look at if they have hardware on site, you know, all right, your risk appetite, is it secure? How secure is it? Do you have the guards? Do you have, you know, what type of locks do you have? Is it, you know, what type of doors is it behind? Or do you have a desktop server sitting behind somebody's desk? Whereas when you have cloud services, that risk, that hardware risk now is almost out of your hands. You can basically consider it as secure as it's going to be able to be, you know, and then just have to worry about the software aspect of it and the services that you're running. So I think cloud, again, I'm coming around to cloud, Keatron, all right? I'm coming around.
See, that's why you need to get into it so you can know the answers to those things.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you all the answers. I don't have time to tell you on this meeting tonight.
When you start teaching the class, me and Davin need the link. You let us know so we can sign up.
Yeah, because you guys are out here teaching people, right? Like, you're teaching people how to do this, and you need to start including that in your message.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
for
I'm gonna.
sure.
Well, you pull up your
Uncle Pete's
slides.
gonna start jumping in these little sessions and be like, "Hey,
You pull up
Hey,
your
that's why I
slides, we'll
got
go
you,
get more beers.
Keatron. Teach me.
But I mean, honestly, this is like cloud. Like, I'm still amazed when you hear like there's another data breach because someone just misconfigured the AWS bucket, or people are like, "Oh, I thought the cloud provider had security." I mean, it's like there's some even basic
you
stuff
could still
that you read
Google
about. It's
open
like,
AWS S3 buckets. Like, you could still throw that into Google and find them.
It's like directory traversal days.
Look, let me just say this to you guys. So to that point that John just made, here's the way that I always sum it up for people. If you adopt AWS, Google Cloud, or Azure technologies, you have the ability to actually be more secure than you've ever been. In the same sentence, if you adopt Google, AWS, or Azure Cloud, you have the ability to be less secure than you've ever been as well. Yeah. So you have extreme flexibility there in both directions now. Mm-hmm. And if you architect it, design it, and set it up right, you can get security capabilities that you just didn't have before. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, the technologies and the services are there specifically to give you that visibility that, again, it's impossible to get if it's your physical equipment.
For sure.
So, I mean, that's why you got to get in and learn the technology.
I will say, as a hunter, I'm more impressed with the cloud logs that I've gotten a hold of than I am than on-prem. Way better visibility coming out of Microsoft,
especially a big environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I support a very large enterprise, and threat hunting in a large enterprise is fun. Talk about training for a second. There's no good training for hunting. Go look for the anomalies. When I go look for that thing in your cute little blog and I find 10 million of them in 24-hour period, we need to do better at hunting training. But
threat hunting's fun though, man.
The visibility, I think. What's that? I
said threat hunting is fun.
It is. I'm actually wearing my threat hunter shirt. Was this D for Diva? I believe.
I'm wearing my army shirt.
Well, Andy, take my training and tell me what you think of that, and then I'll give you a free voucher.
All right. I will say the other thing, though, going from the tactical level, let's go up to the strategic level. What John hit on about open buckets. People thought for a long time, people were thinking about risk transference. Yeah, you can transfer that risk, but what was the old Army saying? We always had, you can delegate authority, but you can't delegate responsibility. You still own that risk. If you're the CISO and you accept cloud risk, you still own that equipment and that risk. I give you my data as a user. I don't give it to your third party.
Yeah.
You contracted out that risk. I'm still holding you accountable.
Yeah.
If you leave a bucket open, I think you should start, we need to, as people, need to start suing when people are mishandling our data.
So, and I'm gonna leave you these final words because we're well over an hour now. Here's my take on it, and I think we really, as a community, need to start coming together on this and hold these companies accountable. And a company can only provide identity protection for so long. And I think it has become a futile endeavor with how many breaches they are. The only way to truly hold a company accountable is to make them financially pay the clients that were breached. So if my data was breached, you're going to pay me. I don't care if it's $50. You're going to pay me because that identity protection I've had probably for 10 years now because of all the other breaches out there. It does me no good. I mean, OPM was hacked how many years ago? Guess what? Everybody has my social security number, probably my name, all 5 of my addresses that I've ever had, or 10 or whatever it was at the time. Like, the information's out there at this point. So guess what? If you get breached again, now we need to hold them financially liable and have them pay the clients that they lost their data. And I think that's the only way security is really going to meet that. We really need to protect this data, or we can't just get a minimum contract with, whomever to provide identity protection. We actually have to pay money to these people that are probably going to sue us for millions of dollars, because let's be honest, in America, we go for as much money as we can. That's legitimately what's going to end up happening, because identity protection is only going to take you so far. Everybody already has it because every company has had to provide it for the past probably 10 years. So those are my final thoughts on.
Except if every company goes bankrupt from paying out money for data breaches,
right?
Then we won't have an economy anymore. Then
but if you think about it, won't that make them more? Wouldn't that put more responsibility on them to put security more as a priority versus how they
that would happen in Disneyland, but not in real life.
Yeah, but however, wouldn't that make the skill gap even harder for entry level folks?
It absolutely would.
Yeah,
and
it would.
And
it would.
To go back, Dayspring, you made a comment earlier that I wanted to at least talk on for a second. Even me, 12 plus years in IT, there are still positions that I feel like I'm unqualified for. I don't necessarily feel like that feeling
it'll never
goes
go
away completely. Yeah, it never really goes away completely. Just don't give up hope when applying. Whether it's internship or a full-time role or part-time, whatever, just keep grinding it out, man. Just keep learning.
Yep. So before we leave,
don't get discouraged. You're not getting interviews. We all applied to hundreds of jobs and never got interviews.
For sure.
Bad interview questions. It happens, man.
I totally
my interview
agree.
questions. Someone asked me once on an interview, "What's your experience with the internet?"
Oh, I get. Yeah.
Was your answer porn?
I still don't know how to answer that. 10 years later, I don't know how to answer.
He was in the army. Yes, that was his answer.
and to kind of backtrack to what Keatron said about several interviews. So before I got my current internship, I did have several interviews which I failed horribly, and I got to several final stage interviews, and the next day I would get a call we won with someone else, someone that was more qualified, something like that. And I feel like those experiences, those failed experiences, give you some kind of a stepping stone to your next the position you're eventually gonna get. So when I finally got the current position I'm in, I knew that a lot of what probably made me succeed at getting the position was my past failures and my past experiences from past failed interviews. So you definitely have to fail several times before you get to what is eventually good for you.
And be glad that some companies even responded to reject you. Sometimes I don't even get that.
So,
as far as risk, you'd be surprised how many security vendors that make all these tools that we use put security last, which is a whole other topic that we don't need to go down that rabbit hole.
So look, before we cut out, because legitimately we probably should cut out here. My last take is gonna be on imposter syndrome, because it's real big in our career field. Look, this wall behind me, and I talked about it before in one of my older videos, is not to brag, is not for anything like that. It's for me. It's because I know where I came from. And I still, to this day, feel like I'm lost, feel like I don't belong, feel like I should be doing something else. It happens to all of us. And if somebody tells you it has not happened to them probably in the past 6 months, they're lying to you, because it does. You get to a point where I don't know what I'm doing. And so what I do, I turn around, I look, and I realize what I have and where I came from. So don't ever let feeling like you don't belong get to you. Talk to somebody, because I guarantee you everybody out there has been in the same position and has made it through. Because we look at dude, Dayspring, look at what you're already doing on YouTube with A+ and Net+ and everything you got going on. Just go back and look at what you've done. And I guarantee you'll realize that you belong here. And that's just like anybody else. Anybody that's watching, anybody that is going to watch, believe in yourself, believe in what you've done, and don't get inside your head. Because if you live inside your head, you're going to be completely lost and you're just going to quit. Get out of your head. Realize that you can do this. Take all of us on this screen right now as an example, because all of us came from somewhere different to get to where we're at. And we all came from a different background. So go on whatever, and legitimately don't ever feel like you don't belong, because everybody belongs here. If you want to do this, you belong here. So saying that, it has been a blast having all of you on here. It really has. This is Security Happy Hour, and I know we're well over an hour, but I really enjoyed this conversation. I need to grab me another one. But hey, go ahead, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button down below, hit that alarm bell. That way you get notified anytime I put out a new video or go live. And look, follow all these people. Look, you can Google them, or, you know, just go on my Twitter and you can find all their handles. I've tagged them and God knows how many posts at this point. Go on LinkedIn and find them. But seriously, anybody on here, find them. Let them be your mentor. Let them help you through it. Find me. I'm on Discord, Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, you name it. You can find me. I'm out there. And let us be your mentors. Let us be your guides. And everybody else, enjoy your weekend. Enjoy this video. And while you're at it, go ahead, stop by Patreon or Cyber Warrior Studios and buy some merch. Have a great weekend.
See you guys.
So, now that I muted desktop and